impact of information overload. We're going to understand how we learn because it is important for us to understand how our users learn and make sense of the documents that we deliver. Then we understand what's cognitive load theory and also understand cognitive overload and then see some techniques, writing techniques to prevent cognitive overload. Okay, so I'm going to keep this a little interactive. So let's consider this scenario. You are assigned a new feature in your product. You don't understand much of it. And surprisingly, there is no functional spec. Has this happened to you before? Good. So I work in a regular IT company where there is no functional spec. Good. Okay, so you have to go to your developer and get information out of him, right? And he's this really techie guy, an architect of the product who only talks in technology, right? So you go to him, you've done some bit of your homework, you go to him, and he starts talking about the product. To begin with, you're with him and you're happy, okay, I get this, okay, good, good. And as the time progresses, he starts throwing some technical mumbo jumbo at you. And very soon you feel, okay, there's something hitting me, okay, something's going on. And then you feel dizzy because you don't understand what's going on. Did you feel like this any time? I felt this often. Every time there is a new release, this is the first place I start at. There is a chance that when you start like this and take this overwhelming feeling with you and start documenting, just maybe you are transferring that overwhelming feeling to your user too. And he or she also is feeling overloaded because they don't understand what you have written. Not everybody, but maybe sometimes. So what is the impact of information overload? Like we all know, it disrupts learning. You lose attention, you don't pay attention anymore, you're waiting for it to get over. Maybe you'll wait for me to finish talking in 40 minutes. It diverts attention, loses interest, right? So you're prone to errors and then that leads to poor decision making. So why does the mind get overloaded? Now to understand why the mind gets overloaded, I think we'll need to understand how we learn. So they're closely related to each other. Once you understand how we learn, we can also understand why we get overloaded and then see some techniques to prevent overload. Okay? So we'll start off with an exercise about this thing called working memory. But before that, have you ever gone to the grocery shop without a to-do list with you or a list to buy items? Gone, got everything, you're very sure you've got everything you wanted, come back home and then your spouse says, you know what, I wanted Coke and milk and whatever, and you're like, oh, I forgot. Right? Has this happened to you? So I'm normal. Okay? So maybe another example would be, you rush to a room, open it, and then you're like, oh, why was I here in the first place? Right? I thought I was the only one growing old here. Okay. Okay, so let's do a small exercise to understand what is this thing called working memory. So I'm going to throw some random words at you just to keep you awake after a heavy lunch and all that. So I'll throw some random words at you and then we'll do a little bit of math because I'm not good with it. And let's see how this goes. So just hold on to these words for some time. You guys are ready? Okay, flower, bat, book, table, water, sky, stick, bag, hair. Okay? Okay, now let's do some math. I'm very bad at crunching numbers, so I'm assuming whatever you're going to say is right. What is 22 times 8? If you say so, I don't know. What's 11 times 10? Everything is 1000? Okay. What's 5 times 2? Good. Okay, if A is 1 and B is 2 and so on, A plus B plus C plus D. Good. Okay. So can you give me the last 5 letters of the alphabet series but in reverse order? I must thank Kumar because you're pretty attentive today. So, good. Now, can you spit out all those words I told you to hang on to? Good, you're collectively right. But unfortunately, working memory works for an individual. So what is the working memory all about? Working memory is like a RAM. So it's like RAM. So it holds on to some information until it is being processed. If you don't process that information, there are chances that that gets lost. So you probably did not recollect all the 9 words I gave you. You probably remembered about around 7 of them. If you did that, it's a great job. But with the advent of smartphones, even if you remember 3, you're good enough because the attention span is reduced nowadays. We just had the discussion in the morning. So working memory is the memory in action. So it temporarily holds on to some amount of information that is needed to process temporarily till it is stored to a long-term memory. What's long-term memory? We'll see in a while. Okay? It allows you to store immediate experiences. It also helps retrieve from the long-term memory and process that information, put it back there. So what's long-term memory? Long-term memory is a model where the data is retained in your mind for a longer period of time. Tell me, how many of you here know to cycle? Cycling. When did you last learn to cycle? Long back, exactly. So yeah, so that's the thing I was trying to bring about here, that you learn to cycle long back in your childhood, but you still remember it. Even if you don't practice it, anytime you start, you know how to cycle or you know how to swim. Because this is stored in your long-term memory. Okay? So how do we learn? Now we understand what's working memory, that's person in action for the temporary amount of information. There is long-term memory. How do we learn? We learn by building something called as a schema. So schemas are patterns that your brain tries to process when information is being thrown at it. So it tries to form a pattern and put it in the long-term memory, right? So for example, let's say that you're driving from home to work. What are the things you do? Supposing you're carpooling with your friend, you're chatting with her, you're playing the music, or you're taking a call, you're also yelling at somebody who's overtaken you. You're doing a couple of things together, right? You never for once thought about how am I driving? Not unless you were a novice driver, right? So that's become second nature to you when you're driving, right? So that's a schema that has been created and stored in your memory. As opposed to say you have to pick up a friend who is staying somewhere you don't know. So when you drive around, you're looking out, looking for that turn so that you don't miss it. You're more alert. You probably turn down the volume of your music. And now a new schema is being created in your mind, right? That will eventually be transferred to your long-term memory. So whenever there is new information coming to you, you're building schemas. And that schema is getting transferred to the long-term memory. So I'm going to bore you with a little bit theory till we do another exercise. So when information is passed on to a novice user, so he or she doesn't know to create schemas as the information is being received. So till they form schemas of the information being thrown at them, the brain is going to process a lot of information, so you'll have to see to it that it does not get overloaded. As opposed to an expert user who has some existing schemas created and is stored in its long-term memory, so he just has to recollect the existing schema and then build on what he already knows. So it's relatively easy for the person to learn. So that's how a brain of a novice versus an expert would look like. So what is cognitive load? Cognitive load is the amount of items that can be held in the working memory at any point in time. Another concept called the cognitive limit. the two factors that affect cognitive limit, one is the duration and one is the amount of items it can store. So you just experienced it. If you don't use the items stored in your mind for some time, I was throwing random words at you, you could remember some of them. If I would have asked you an hour later, you probably wouldn't have remembered any, right? The amount of information you can store at any point in time is 7, an average. It's a 7 plus or minus 2. This is called the Miller's law. Because George Miller, who's a cognitive psychologist, came up with this theory that the maximum amount of chunks of information your memory can hold at any point in time is 7 plus or minus 2. So this gave me a big realization, because when I speak to my husband, after a point, he's just not listening. Oh, I understand why, because after a point, I understand his working memory cannot take the load. That has stopped me from talking anyway. So that's my cognitive limit. So the cognitive load theory, which is by John Sweller, says that as long as your working memory can take the load thrown at it, you're good. You can learn. Learning happens. So schema formation happens. So this is the ideal situation we should target. If you're writing documents, there is a way we can write documents in a way that the cognitive load on our end user is less than the limit of your working memory. That's what it says, the cognitive load theory. Now, there are types of cognitive loads. Let's do this with the help of the upcoming slides. The 3 types of cognitive loads. One's the extraneous one is the intrinsic one, and the other one's called the germane ones. Let's do this with an exercise. Can you answer this question? I'll read it out for you. As you're reading an ancient palimpsest, you have one philosophical crisis, and then right before lunch, which would have been delicious, you have another one right afterwards. How many philosophical crises have you had in total, ignoring the albatross? Good. I guess this would have been an easier way of asking this question. Right? I could have just asked what's 1 plus 1 equal to. But I just wanted to confuse you. So look at the way this was taken off the net. So whoever wrote it with a lot of additional flowery language. Right? So the extraneous load is actually the way in which we present information so that it complicates the user. The user doesn't understand what you're trying to say. Yes. Yes, definitely. But at the same time, as writers, if we can try to keep it simple and direct, there are ways that we can reduce the load to a certain extent. So we can ensure that by presenting the content in a simpler manner, I'll show you the techniques, which we all know, but then we'll revisit that and we'll see how we can reduce that load. But yes, the circumstances will differ. It differs from person to person. Now, what is the intrinsic load? Intrinsic load is the load that comes with the nature of the problem. So if your manager comes tomorrow and says you get a 10% raise, you quickly calculate what happens, right? So that is the nature of the problem, okay? You're happy or sad about it, but you do the math, right? So you can't complicate it any further. So 1 plus 1 equal to what? So you must understand those digits the operators used, and the nature can't be any more simple. You have to understand that, right? So in a technical writing example, when I say add the class path to the environment variables, I'm clearly talking to a developer. He must understand what class path is, where to set it in the environment variables, where in the control panels will I find the environment variables. These things are supposed to be there. This is the intrinsic load that he has to understand. You can't, work around it. Now there's something called as a germane load, which is actually the effective load or the relevant load on the user. Meaning, again in the same example, when I say add class paths to the environment variables, I'm creating a new schema when I say, I know where I've installed Java, I know that path, I'm equating that to my class path, going to the environment, my environment variables and setting it. So I'm creating my schema there. So I'm going to focus on maximizing my germane load in the sense that I focus on creating new schemas efficiently. And I do that by minimizing my extraneous load. So this is an ideal situation. Your cognitive load theory suggests that you can't do anything about your intrinsic load. You're going to manage it. You can definitely do much about the extraneous load. You're going to minimize it. And when you minimize it, you thereby maximize the germane load where the schema formation happens. Now let's do an exercise because I think I can see a few sleepy heads. I didn't get your question, ma'am.
Does that mean that for it to be in the germane load, it takes that long?
No, it also depends upon how you learn and how every individual learns. But then the learning curve can be complex or simple depending upon. Yeah, so that is tied to the complexity of the product itself. So if it is complex, then you will have a high learning curve. If not, the germane load will happen over time, but if the content is written effectively, it will be maximized. So it depends upon how the content is delivered or is written, right? So this is what we're trying to get at, minimizing the extraneous load and maximizing the germane load. Okay, this is the end of the theory. Now we'll see to it that. We'll revisit the same exercise but with a twist. And because I'm into storytelling and stuff, I wrote my first short story here for this exercise. Okay, what I want you to do is take a look at all those blue words and remember them and see how much you remember. Beach. It's a pleasant sunny day in Goa and the beach looks beautiful. Man. There's a man sitting by the shore, soaking the sun and digging his feet in the sand. Newspaper. As he's lost in his thoughts, a newspaper cutout drifts down by his feet and catches his attention. Picture. His eyes stop at the picture of a convict who seems to have escaped from prison. Scarf. The man in the picture looks cunning and is wearing a red scarf around his neck. Shoes. The man loses interest, chucks the paper, wears his shoes and walks away. Jeep. Just then, two cops come along and drag him to their jeep. Mirror. The man looks at the side view mirror and adjusts his red scarf. How many words do you recollect? I think I can take a safe guess and say that you probably remembered more words than you did when I threw some random words at you. Right? Because there was schema formation happening. You were visualizing when I said beach. There was a reason I did not give a picture there. Because I said the story and you were actually imagining this happening. Some schema formation happened. It was easy for you to learn by association. So you remembered more words. Right? Now let's see how we can prevent cognitive overload in our documents. So let's see how all this helps us. So we start at the planning stage because the minute somebody gives you some feature to document, either there is a functional spec with all the content there, there's way too much content sometimes and it becomes difficult for you to weed out the essentials, or you go to a developer who's pretty psyched about this new feature that he's developing, that he wants to talk at length about every little thing he's done. So very soon you feel overloaded and you don't know what in this is important and needs to go in my document. We've all come across this situation. So pester the developer, try to get answers, find out what is relevant to you. Should my user know all of it? It depends upon your user. What is the target audience like? Right? So that's the most important part, identifying your target audience. So here, I don't know if you can read at the back. So there's a guy calling the customer care and saying, my computer doesn't work, the hard drive crashed, what do I do? So he asks, did you back up? And he backs up against the wall and says, why is it going to blow? Right? So identify with your target audience. See to it that they understand what you're trying to say. Kumar just said that. It is our duty to make them understand. Right? So start by understanding their background and their knowledge will help you. If you know you're talking to a developer, the tone you use in your document would be different from that of a layman. So build on what they have and start introducing one concept after the other. So if you have introduced a concept, build on it. Don't complicate it the other way around. So for an example, if I'm going to target a database administrator, I'm going to say a tuple in foo spaces is similar to a row in a table. He'll understand that better, as opposed to when I say address a programmer, I would say a tuple in foo spaces is similar to an instance of a class. So bring that tone, the difference in the tone based on what the end user or your target audience is. Okay? These are some things which you already know. I'm just reiterating it because that prevents cognitive overload. Introducing components first before actually discussing how they interact with each other. So you have a web server, you have a database server, you have other components talking to them. First introduce the components and then show their correlation. Logically chunk content into units that you can understand, your users can understand. The logically bit is very important. You can always chunk, but always logically chunk it so that your end user understands. Conveying one idea per topic is easy because you know data. Many people have used data now, and you only use one idea per topic there. So there is either a concept, task, or a reference. So it makes you think right then when you're creating the topic as to what you want to do. Let's do an exercise. So just think of this as a series of text, say, you know. How do you, what is your first reaction you read that? It's overwhelming. There's so much information. Is this better? Exactly. This is the right way of chunking. I'm so glad people are awake. So, yeah, so this would be the easiest for you to relate to, right? Schema formation in this case. The total chunks the brain reads is 14. So there's so much effort that the brain is taking. In this case, it is 5, but there are new schema formation happening. In this case, it is the easiest because you've all related to this. So there are 5 pieces of chunks there. Now here's a bad example of chunking. Just take a moment and read this. I'm sure fetching records is a big topic all by itself. I've tried to bring it to fit into a slide. So try and identify if you can find some unit chunks there, smaller units of chunks, which you can, you know, segregate it into. Okay. So I have one way of doing it. Maybe you've identified more ways of doing it. So I have tried and segregated into unit chunks. And of course, there are going to be a lot more content under each of these things. But this is for the benefit. I'm just taking the leeway because it has to fit into the slide. So importing the package, registering the JDBC driver, opening a connection, executing the query, but by creating the statement first, then the result set, you process it, and then you clean up the environment. This would be so much more easier for your end user to understand smaller chunks of information and build on it. Right? You're not overloading the user. The first slide showed you how overloaded he felt. Keep it simple. That will definitely reduce the extraneous load. You saw that in the first example. Can anybody tell me what this means? Exactly. You get a goodie. It's twinkle, twinkle, little star. Okay? So now let's see one real life example. So here's a product I work with, and unfortunately for me, all of them speak only, it's geek speak all the time. So when I had to do the release notes, it started with this, the first draft. So this is what came to me, and then I converted it to something else. Maybe you find a better way of doing it. So I've just put it there the way it is, okay? Huh? Yes, so because I am working with a remote team, when there is a closed issue, they just send me the issue. Doesn't help. We'll have to then start having calls with them to understand. So of course, based on this is not what I came up with a good example. I had to interact with him a couple of times to actually come down to the good example. This is all he was trying to say. Okay, so if you look at it, there is a lot of extra information there that is not necessary, especially if it is a closed issue. You just want to know if there was an issue and you closed it. Okay? Coming to lists, again, the George Miller rule here applies, a 7 plus or minus 2. Divide things which are lengthy into sub-steps and, if possible, give a subheading there. Bad example. So here's a bunch of things that is just listed, and you don't, you kind of get lost when you look at it. It's overwhelming too. Here's one way I would categorize it. Right? Now, you could use illustrations like, that's exactly what Kumar is saying. And I was so happy that a lot of his content was overlapping with mine. So you could use diagrams to break the monotony, but just don't use a diagram for the sake of it. See to it that it makes sense. Have enough callouts with your diagrams and try and keep the text together with the diagram. So something like this. And supposing you read this, with shared nothing persistence, each node that joins a space as a seeder maintains a copy of the space data on the disk. Each node that joins as a seeder writes its data to the disk and reads the data when needed for recovery. It's so much better when you have a diagram along with it. Right? And these days, the upcoming trend is to use infographics. Right? So here's one. You can spend some time on it because it's an interesting one that says how to focus. I don't know if you can read it at the back. So there is enough graphics and text that go together. It says 95% of people say this struggle to focus. So there are some ways to focus. Keep food at your desk. Glucose helps your brain focus. So if anybody's having a candy here, I will understand that you're only trying to focus on my presentation. Turn off the phone. Most phone calls are not urgent. I leave them on only for a boring conference. Get a good chair. So I'm going to go back home and take my manager's chair because they say that there is a reason why bosses sit in good chairs. Time yourself and see how much you did in 1 hour. So well, these are some techniques which help you stay focused. But just by looking at this infographic, it's appealing, one, two, you feel like reading it and using it. Similarly, use videos. Now I didn't want to put a video here because I didn't know whether my PowerPoint will misbehave. It's not been behaving well today. So yeah, your working memory has two ways of processing information. It uses the visual senses as well as the auditory senses. So what happens is when I'm seeing something, I'm also listening to something. If you look at the previous infographic, it said listening to classical music or no music improves focus. Right? So you can do two things together. As you're listening to me, you're also reading the slide there. Right? So when you have a complex task, try using videos. TIBCO definitely has a lot of videos for complex tasks nowadays. Avoid redundancy. Do not repeat the same concept twice in your document. If by chance the first part of it was not explained properly the first time, by explaining it elsewhere in the guide, you're not going to help the user. Instead, use a hyperlink and do not use different terms to mean the same thing. So do not use object somewhere and an instance somewhere else, right? Or if you're trying to call something a record, don't call it a row somewhere else or a tuple somewhere else. Use the same word consistently throughout the guide. Now there are some redundancies that you observe in sentence constructions which you could avoid. Instead of saying the purpose of the system is to provide, you can just say the system provides. The document has been prepared to outline the blah. The document outlines the blah in the form of as, in the event of if, in order to, exhibits the ability to, can, and there are many more like this. Use a task-based approach. Again, like Kumar's session said, talk to the user, what does he want to do, right? The left-hand side, if you look at these examples, they don't talk to the user, he can't connect with them. But at the same time, he probably would be interested in inserting a tuple into a space or importing metadata. So use a task-based approach to connect with your user. Okay, what's a noun cluster? Yes, so a stack of series of nouns placed one after the other oftentimes confuse the user, but if you talk to a developer, he will not see any difference there because they're so used to using those terms. So try to break them, and one way of breaking them is to introduce a verb there. So if you look at the first bit, I had actually highlighted it. I don't know if you can even see that. Okay, the request acknowledgement exchange data bit is set in high mem. So all the information in bold is a noun stack, and how do you break it? The data bit to exchange request acknowledgements is set in high mem. Similarly, the media access control protocols are available in 3 variants. The protocols to control media access are available in 3 variants. The release offers cloud service deployment workflows. The release offers workflows to deploy a cloud service. So you can go the extra mile, providing samples if you have the time, provide cheat sheets, provide simulations for complex tasks, provide some job aids, like have some default port lists. Sometimes there's so many ports in your product that it's good to have a list shared with them. Now, because you are the first user of your product, I thought you should also have a good working memory. So I'm sharing some tips to improve your working memory. So how many of you all remember Twinkle Twinkle Little Star? Why is that so? Because you've been repeating it every time somebody visits your house, beta, narrate. Right from that day till you're talking to your kids, you're teaching them the rhymes. So you remember all of them because of repetition, right? So repeat the tasks till you get it right, and I am sure that your user will also understand. Your understanding will be, passed on to your user. Use mnemonics, like you use WebGR for a rainbow. Learn by associating things with what you know in the past. That helps you. Learning by visualization. I'm sure you did that when I did the storytelling. You visualized it, right? Now do some brain training. This site called Lumosity, I'm not advertising, but I really enjoyed doing some brain games there. And so is Brain HQ. This slide deck will be shared with you, so the links will be available to you later. And one interesting thing is whenever there is a team meeting, I sit and doodle. Now I have a reason to tell my manager that it is because it's improving my brain, right? So doodle. Also play board games. I'm very happy that Scrabble is in the list. So you can download the app and play. Uno also. Exercise, aerobics like walking, dance, anything that you like to do. Meditation, and my best exercise, sleep. Okay, sleep well for your good working memory. If somebody tells you you're sleeping much, you say that I'm improving my working memory. Learn a new skill. Learn a new language. I know 7, not one properly though. And learn a new musical instrument. Like she said, I was learning to play the djembe. I'm still playing it, learning it. Eat right, something I don't do, but you can do it. Greens such as spinach, lettuce, broccoli, kale. Fruits such as bananas and apricots, plums and cherries. And the only thing I listen to is I eat dark chocolates. Right? So in closing, we learned that cognitive load is a result of the extraneous load plus the intrinsic load plus the germane load. You need to reduce the extraneous load and manage the intrinsic load and increase the germane load on the user. Working memory has the capacity of storing 7 plus or minus 2. That's the Miller's law. Ensure that you write in a way that promotes schema formation, and ensure that the cognitive load on your working memory is manageable. And we saw some ways of not overloading your user. Right? That's about it. I'm sure you're happy to see this slide. Thank you. So if you have any questions, you can talk to me. Yes? Cheat sheets are, like I said, you have your port and port list or, things like that that you can provide to your user. So you have error codes and what they are and how to resolve them. You provide sheets to help your end user, like a ready reckoner kind of. FAQs are different. Not necessarily, like a small sheet that tells you, okay, this is the error, here's what you do. Something like that. It can be anything, but a cheat sheet that you can quickly look at and you know what is to be done.